Welcome back to the coin world. Old coin review and value, the ultimate destination for rare coin discoveries, numismatic treasures, and the hidden value in your pocket change. Welcome to my channel, The History of the 1988 Liberty 5-cent coin, more popularly known as the Jefferson nickel. It's a coin so familiar to Americans that it's often overlooked, and yet certain versions of this nickel from 1988 are now selling for thousands of US dollars. Behind the face of Thomas Jefferson lies a fascinating tale of mint marks, design changes, rare errors, and near-mythical preservation. This is the 1988 nickel. Like you've never seen it before, not as pocket change, but as a hidden treasure. The Jefferson nickel had been in production since 1938. Created to replace the Buffalo nickel, designed by Felix Schlag, it features the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, on the obverse, and his famous Monticello estate on the reverse. But by the 1980s, the U.S. Mint was preparing for change. New dies, new hubs, and new production techniques meant subtle transitions in design, and those subtle changes created opportunities for valuable and rare coins to be born. 1988 was a year of transition, and in transition, mistakes happen: mint errors, die clashes, and anomalies that today fetch 4 and even 5-figure prices at auction. The casual eye, every 1988 nickel looks the same, but to collectors, the differences between common and rare are hidden in the finest details. In 1988, the Jefferson nickel was struck to mints. Philadelphia P mint mark, over 600 million coins produced. Both saw heavy circulation, which is why coins in pristine condition today are exceedingly rare. Metal content: 75% copper, 25% nickel. Weight: 5 grams. Even though it's called a nickel, this coin is mostly copper, a fact that plays a role in its durability and color over time. However, even copper-nickel alloy coins fade, spot, or corrode if not perfectly preserved. What makes the 1988 nickel worth thousands? The majority of 1988 nickels remain worth face value, but a few specific varieties, errors, and high-grade examples have become incredibly valuable. Why is this important? Because most nickels from the 1980s suffered from weak strikes. Finding a strong strike with clear, full steps is a rarity, and that rarity equals value. Coins graded MS66 or higher by PCGS or NGC can command 4-digit prices, especially if their full steps, die clashes, ghost-like images from the reverse appearing. A portion of the coin missing $100, dollar for 100, struck on a dime. Planchet wrong metal, size, worth up to $5,000. Some 1988 nickels with a struck through grease, error, or missing elements have fetched hundreds of dollars, especially when combined with high grades. Some 1988 nickels may have been struck using a 1987 reverse die, or an early version of a 1989 die, depending on die reuse. Collectors speculate on subtle design transitions and anomalies in Monticello's detail, especially the steps and roofline. Though rare, these transitional hybrids are of great interest to numismatists and could eventually gain significant recognition. 1988 was one of change. Ronald Reagan's second presidential term was ending. The Cold War still loomed, but America was confident, tech-driven, and prosperous. The Berlin Wall had not yet fallen, but tensions were shifting. The digital age was stirring, and in the middle of it all, the U.S. Mint kept pressing coins to fuel the economy. The Jefferson nickel, already a 50-year-old design by 1988, continued to be minted in vast quantities. But while it looked unchanged, subtle evolutions were happening behind the scenes. Evolutions that would define the rarity and value of some 1988 nickels. Today, by the late 1980s, the U.S. Mint had begun transitioning toward modernized die making technology. Previously, dies were engraved and prepared using older, manual techniques, but in the 1980s, the Mint adopted newer processes. However, this transition wasn't without error. In fact, it was these very shifts that caused some coins to be struck with mismatched dies, double impressions, or inconsistent step details, leading to today's most valuable 1988 nickel varieties. The reverse of the Jefferson nickel, designed by Felix Schlag, shows Jefferson's historic Monticello home in Virginia. But there's more to it than just architecture. It's worth noting that the original design proposed by Schlag had a more artistic style. The U.S. Mint altered it to make it appear more formal and symmetrical. The result, a design whose fine details, like the number of steps on Monticello, became a critical feature for grading and value. In later years, one of the reasons high-grade 1988 nickels are so valuable today is because most coins from that era were heavily circulated. Coin rolls were opened frequently for vending machines, tolls, and public transportation. Inflation made 5 cents less valuable, meaning nickels weren't often saved. Coin albums from the 60s and 70s focused more on earlier dates, not modern ones. As a result, few people thought to preserve 1988 nickels, especially in uncirculated condition. That makes the surviving MS67 and MS68 full steps nickels incredibly scarce today. During the late 1980s, the Denver and Philadelphia mints were operating at near capacity, with over 1.1 billion nickels produced in 1988 between the two locations. Even a 0.001% error rate still means thousands of flawed coins. These conditions resulted in the creation of valuable error coins, which are now known by specialists and tracked in collector reference guides. In 1988, numismatics was starting to change. The concept of full steps designations was gaining traction, especially among Jefferson nickel enthusiasts. Still, the focus remained on earlier coins: buffalo nickels, silver half dollars, wheat pennies. Few collectors believed coins from 1988 could one day be rare. That lack of attention is what makes the few surviving high-grade examples today so much more valuable. They're not just rare because of low mintage, they're rare because nobody thought. 1988. The Jefferson nickel had already been in production for 50 years. Having first debuted in 1938, it replaced the beloved but difficult to strike buffalo nickel, and the U.S. Treasury selected Felix Schlage's design, a portrait of President Thomas Jefferson paired with an image of his home, Monticello. Unlike other U.S. coins that underwent redesigns in the mid-20th century, the Jefferson Nickels design remained largely unchanged from 1938 to 2003, making the 1988 issue part of the classic era of American nickels. In 1988, the United States was wrapping up Ronald Reagan's presidency, a period marked by economic growth, tax reform, and Cold War diplomacy. The U.S. Mint operated under this stable but fast-moving climate, producing billions of coins annually. The Denver D and Philadelphia P mints were both producing enormous quantities of coins in 1988, and the Jefferson nickel was one of the most widely used denominations. Despite inflation, the nickel retained functional value used in vending machines, payphones, and public transit. By the late 1980s, the mint was facing several technical and logistical challenges: overused dies due to the high-volume minting process, striking pressure inconsistencies, especially for Monticello steps, lack of clarity in design details, which later became a focus in grading standards. Because of these factors, most 1988 nickels were poorly struck, especially from the Philadelphia Mint. That's why finding a 1988 P or 1988 D nickel with full steps FS and in mint state 67 or above is extremely rare, making such coins worth thousands. Today, during the late 1980s, the professionalization of coin grading changed how modern coins like the Jefferson nickel gained new attention as collectors realized that sharp details and perfect preservation were exceptionally scarce, even for recent coins. For the 1988 5-cent coin, the spotlight on full steps was growing. A coin had to show 5 or 6 fully separated steps on Monticello to earn the FS designation. Only a tiny fraction of 1988 nickels qualified, especially from Philadelphia. No major official varieties were announced for 1988, but collectors and researchers have since identified die cracks, especially around Jefferson's collar or the Monticello dome. Many of these flawed coins were tossed into circulation unnoticed, but today, they're considered rare. Mint errors worth hundreds to thousands depending on the severity and grade, with a combined total of over 1.18 billion nickels. It's easy to think the 1988 coin is common, and it is, in worn condition. But here's the key: uncirculated, well-struck, and error-free examples are almost non-existent, especially with full steps. Full steps nickels from the 1980s are some of the lowest population coins in modern U.S. coinage. Certification reports show fewer than 50 total examples of 1988 full steps nickels in high grade across all third-party services, an astonishingly low number. Then you off watching.